Hello, Faith family, and welcome back to another episode of A New Creation, True Life Testimonies. I'm your host, Vanessa Moore. I am super excited to announce my next guest. From wanting nothing to do with Jesus, to hearing lies about Christianity, to touring with Bob Dylan, and now finally singing for the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Please help me welcome husband and wife couple, Marty and Jenny Goetz.
Hello.
I'm so happy to have you guys here. We were just talking backstage about how we kind of crossed paths, but we didn't know we crossed paths. You came to my church, and then years later, I came to my church. So you've known my pastor longer than I have, and it's just so great to have you here. I saw your testimonies years and years. I got saved 4 years ago now, I think, in 2017.
Wow.
And
what date was that you said?
June. It was I had a theophany. It was a course of like 2 days that it happened. It was June 6th and 7th, 2017.
Wow.
And so that sent me on a trajectory to just find testimonies. I was hungry for testimonies, and it led me to Harvest Christian Fellowship, Pastor Mike Finizio. And but it took me about a year to read the Bible. So upon looking at all these testimonies, I came across yours on One for Israel, and I just became obsessed with One for Israel, and found you guys. And so it's awesome that you're here with us.
Thank
You guys are my guests, and we have an hour, so we can decide who wants to go first, or
I think it works best for us if you ask questions, and it's good that Jenny's here because I ramble. I'm an aging baby boomer, and I have a tendency to just kind of talk until someone shuts me up. So why don't we begin with ask Jennifer a few questions? That would be great, because you guys have a similar story that you've lived in New York. So that would be a good place.
You lived in New York too.
Why don't we start with you?
Okay.
Take it away, Jenny. So I remember somewhere in your testimonies, you were talking about how I can't remember if this was before you were touring with Dylan or during that time. It's very cool who, that you had this woman, Bob Dylan's girlfriend, right, at the time, was praying for you.
May I interrupt, Vanessa, for a second? I don't want to take over your show, but I want to just set this up by saying that Jennifer's parents, her father is named Ben Yaffe, and he, like you, was in, because he's no longer with us, but he's an actor. And his career went way back to like things that people your age would not know anything of. I don't hope that doesn't sound condescending.
No, I'm a 70s girl when it comes to music, but yeah.
Well, he was in like new shows on TV, something called like Dr. Kildare,
Naked
City. He was like a bona fide Carnegie Tech University graduate, really fine actor. He never could make a living in it after age 55, and he got in the book selling business, but really talented. And her mother is a coloratura soprano named Gloria.
And she was born and raised in the Bronx.
I mean, somebody that was compared to Joan Sutherland, Beverly Sills. I mean, that kind of a voice.
Wow.
I don't have that voice.
So yes, she does. But I was going to say that I just want to set that up, that she was raised outside of New York City.
In Tenafly, New Jersey.
So
Are you familiar with Tenafly since you were in New York?
I've heard of it, but I've never been there.
It's actually one city away from your pastor's city.
It's right across the George Washington Bridge.
Okay.
First exit.
The Finizio.
Anyway.
So let's take it away.
So I was born in New York City, and I was raised in Tenafly, New Jersey from the time I was 5 till I was 17 and went to college. And I was born into a Jewish home, as was Marty. Our parents were Jewish. Our grandparents were Orthodox Jews, come over from Russia and Poland. His were from Poland. And
you don't have to tell my story. I'll tell my story.
Okay. And I did not grow up believing in God. I was taught that when you died, you went into the earth as worm food, and that God was just made up. He wasn't real. My father's father believed in him, but my parents really did not. And a lot of second generation Jewish people grew up in homes like that. So not believing in God, I still wondered, what are we here for? I mean, as a little child, you do ask yourself those questions. And I wondered. And when I was 14 years old, I had a terrible terrible tragedy happen. I was babysitting for a little girl. My parents owned a 2-family home, and I was upstairs babysitting for the little baby Jennifer. She was just a year old. And while I was babysitting for her, I got a phone call from her dad, who was in New York City. And he said to me, please don't leave Jennifer alone. Anita's been in a serious car accident and she may not live. Anita was his wife. And indeed, that night she was killed by a hit and run car accident. And when I went downstairs to go to sleep that night, my parents came upstairs to take care of Jennifer and wait there while her relatives came to pick her up. And I wrote this 2-page thing, and I still have it today. I mean, I can't believe I saved it. 1967, this happened. And I basically said, if there is a God, please let her live. And because she didn't, I just at that point gave up on God. I started thinking about things like fate, because I was thinking if I had just kept Anita Glick home in the apartment for 2 minutes longer, she wouldn't have been at that corner on the street when she crossed to be hit by that car. And so at 14 years old, I started thinking about all these things. And I would say it really threw me into a depression that lasted years until I got saved, probably. And at 15, I started smoking pot and getting high and being with boys, doing all that stuff that we did in the 1960s. And then when in 1970.
But also your brother was in a rock and roll band.
Honey, I'm getting there. If you're going to let me tell my story, honey, let me tell my story. So I went off to college in 1971. I graduated high school, and I'm 67. He's 68. And you
guys are fantastic. You guys are God kept you young.
We're preserved well.
She's a freak of nature.
And
salt and light does preserve well.
But what preserves well?
Salt.
Salt. Oh God, it does, and it makes me swell.
Salt and light.
But anyway, so I had a boyfriend who was in a band with my cousin and my brother and Tony Bennett's kids, 2 of Tony Bennett's sons.
And I worked for that family.
You worked for the Bennetts?
Yep.
For Tony?
Yeah, I babysat I was the nanny for his grandchildren.
For which grandchildren?
Danny's got 2 little girls named Lucy and Sadie.
Okay.
Oh,
my brother Danny was in a band called Quacky Duck and his Barnyard Friends with my brother, Degal, his brother.
Wow.
No.
David Mansfield.
I know about that band.
Oh my gosh. So I was born.
Whoa.
This is
he told me all about it. I didn't know, but you guys were there. It's crazy.
I'm going to
give
you a Yiddish word that you might know, being in the arts. Beschert.
Which one?
Beschert. Do you know the word beschert?
No. Thank you though.
It was meant to be.
Yes.
I can't believe so. Okay, so
you were gonna say I was Meshuggah, but
well, that's
so Danny and Degal and my cousin Curtis, my brother Jonathan, who else? Gordon Javna and David Mansfield were in this band Quacky Duck, and David
and his Barnyard Friends.
And his Quacky Duck and his Barnyard Friends. That was the name of the band. So I was dating David Mansfield, who was in the band, and David was
the genius of the band.
He played the violin, the mandolin, the pedal steel guitar, the dobro. I mean, his father was the first violinist in the New York Philharmonic. And Quacky Duck was playing at a club in New York City called Max's Kansas City. And the guy that used to book them took me to a club one night in New York called The Bitter End. And on stage were some musicians, and Ferris, his name was Ferris Buhafa. He said to me, see those people on stage? They're going to go on the road with Bob Dylan, because he's putting together a tour to sing in smaller venues. And smaller venues at that time were auditoriums that held maybe 2,000 people, not arenas. So,
for us, that would be a huge venue.
So I said to Ferris, well, if I call David, can you introduce him to these guys? Because, David lived, 15, 20 minutes away. So I called David, and the next night David came down and went backstage with Bobby Neuwirth, who was the head of the band, out on stage and was playing the violin and was invited to join this band that became the Rolling Thunder Review. And Bob Dylan invited all the wives and girlfriends to go. So David invited me, and that was the end of Quacky Duck and his Barnyard Friends. The band dismembered after that. And so I got to travel on the Rolling Thunder Review in 1975 for 6 weeks. In 1976, and Joni Mitchell joined the tour in Canada. And so it was Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Joni Mitchell, Rambling Jack Elliott, Allen Ginsberg, the New York beat poet, Roger McGuinn from a group called The Byrds. People like Jack Nicholson would show up, Ringo Starr would show
Shepard.
up. Sam Shepard he was hired as a playwright for the tour, and he did write a movie called Ronaldo and Clara. But it was, David and I were the youngest people on the tour. I was maybe 22, David was 19. And so they treated us like the little, they kind of watched over us. And they were all in their 30s, mid 30s.
They were old.
They were in their mid 30s older. But it was a pretty phenomenal thing for a 22-year-old to do. And then, in 1976, we got to do it again. And then in 1978, I got to go on a 6-week European tour with Bob Dylan and David. And in the midst of all of this, instead of being exciting, and it was exciting, but after that European tour, I got really depressed because I thought, this is not satisfying anything inside of me. I mean, and even especially after the Rolling Thunder Review and being with people like Joni Mitchell, who is the consummate artist. I mean, everything out oozes art. I mean, music, the way she talks, it's poetic. And so after all that, I thought there's got to be something that allows every person that's born to share the same experience of joy. It can't be limited to artistic people or rich people or people who have fame and fortune. The person who has a menial job like a janitor or cleaning people's homes or whatever, they have the same.
What we consider to be menial.
Well, and I ended up cleaning people's homes right after I got saved. But they have the same right to the same happiness that everybody does. And so I started, wondering and asking those questions, and I got involved in a new age thing called Insight. And, you paid $250 for the 4-day experience. And at the end, you all light your candles. And then at the end of that, they sign you up for the next one, which is $650 with a $50 non-refundable thing. And I signed up, but then I started thinking this can't be right because the truth has to be free because everyone has to be able to afford it. So at the end of 1970,
that's great. Yeah.
Again, that was amazing.
The truth has to be free because everyone should be able to afford it.
That's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I love that.
So at the end of 1978, after being on that European tour and after doing, still dating David, but we were kind of on the ends of our relationship. At the end of 1978, I went back to New York and I visited my family there. And my dad gave me his car he was giving me his car to take back to California. And my brother and I were driving back to California, and I stopped in Texas. I dropped my brother off in Austin. I drove on to Fort Worth to visit my friend Stephanie Burnett, who was T-Bone Burnett's wife. And T-Bone had become a believer. He wasn't at the house, but I was having these horrible, horrible dreams that I was being sliced up with a razor blade. And Stephanie, I woke up and I told Stephanie, and she said, ask Jesus to take away those dreams. And I thought, that's simple, simplistic. And I had the same dream the next night. And I remember waking up and going, Jesus, please take away these dreams. And it went away just like that. And before I left her house to go back to Austin to pick up my brother, she looked at her bookshelf and she gave me a book by C.S. Lewis called Mere Christianity.
Oh, yes.
And she gave it to me to read. And I was reading it at a bar in Austin, Texas, while my cousin was in a band. And on page 42, C.S. Lewis said either Jesus was he claimed to be, or he was a raving lunatic, as crazy as a poached egg, a megalomaniac, because he allowed people to worship him. And it's like literally the scales did fall off my eyes. And all of a sudden, my best friends when I was growing up were Roman Catholic. They lived across the street from me. And they would say to me, Jesus died for your sins. I didn't know what that meant. But when C.S. Lewis wrote that, somehow I associated Jesus being the Lamb of God who in Jewish tradition was sacrificed on Passover as an atonement for our sins. And I saw that Jesus was the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. It was amazing. So I got back to California, and T-Bone took me to the Vineyard Christian Fellowship, and a guy named Keith Green was singing.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And he was singing a song about manna in the wilderness. And I thought, what's manna and the Jews have to do with Jesus? You know, I didn't quite see it. And as I was walking out of church, there in the back of the church was Bob Dylan and his girlfriend, Mary Alice.
Wow.
And she and I had just been in New York, 2 weeks before, talking about opening up an Italian coffee shop in California. And when I got back to California, she didn't return my calls. But when I saw her at the Vineyard, I said, what are you doing here? She said, what are you doing here? And I said, I got saved. She said, so did I. And I said, why didn't you answer my phone calls? She said, because girl, I thought you were going to bring me down. And she said to me, you've got to go to discipleship school. And I said, no, I need a job. She said, seek first the kingdom of God, and all else will be added unto you. So I thought, this is what he says to do. And I'm saying I believe in him, so I should. And I did. And I went to Bible school at the Vineyard for 5 months, 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. Bob Dylan was in my class because he got saved. Mary Alice was in my class because she got saved. And 9 other people were in our class. And that year I cleaned Bob Dylan's house. I was a housekeeper.
Somebody.
I was Bette Midler's housekeeper. And,
wow.
And I saw how God, I remember and before I worked for them, I cleaned one house and I made $40 a week. And I remember my discipleship class, I said, does God expect me to tithe? I'm only making $40 a week. And they said, if you believe it's from God, then yes. And I remember putting $4 into the basket. And then like the next day I got a call to clean someone else's house. And I watched how my tithes in that year of 1978 went from $4 a week to like, I was like $180, not a week, probably a month. But back then that was a lot of money. But I just saw how God was so faithful. And praise the Lord, I've just been a believer ever since 1978. What?
Since 1978.
Yeah.
What date 1978 would you say?
Well, the truth is I accepted the Lord in 1977, but I didn't know what I was doing. I would read the Bible, and every time I thought about Jesus, I felt good inside. I guess it was the Holy Spirit. But because I continued living with David, and I even got saved. I went forward and accepted the Lord and was baptized at church on the way. But because I was continuing to live with David, I wasn't discipled. I just kind of added Jesus to my life, to my back pocket. And because of that, my life didn't change. So by the end of 1978, I put that Bible away, and I went, well, that didn't work. But then it was after reading C.S. Lewis's book and going to discipleship school that the lights went on,
May I say something?
And I don't know what date in 1978
Okay, that's okay.
was.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
You don't mind, Vanessa?
Not at all. This is fun. I'm enjoying this.
There was another interesting story. Mary Alice, by the way, is, if anybody's familiar with Bob Dylan's Christian albums.
Serve somebody?
Yeah, exactly. And there was a song called "Covenant Woman." I think it's on the album "Saved."
I thought it was
whatever.
I thought it was on Slow Train Coming.
Anyways, a lot of people think that that was Mary Alice, about whom he wrote that song. I'm just saying, giving a little. But there was an interesting story with Mary Alice regarding the healing power of God.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I was bulimic,
and this is before you.
So I was bulimic for 4 years. And I was really trapped in it. And one day I woke up. No, and I was working with a catering business. It was just two of us, and I was catering. We would cater like concerts. So one night we were catering Todd Rundgren, and I remember putting chapstick on my lips and thinking that feels weird. And when I went to bed that night, I lived alone. I brushed my teeth, and water came squirting out of one side of my mouth, and I thought, I'm going to wake up paralyzed. And sure enough, I woke up the next morning and I had Bell's palsy. I couldn't close my eye. Half my face was paralyzed. And I went to the doctor and they said it's the 7th dorsal nerve that gets stuck in your cranium. And I'm convinced it was because I had forced myself to throw up. And in doing so, you put a lot of pressure on your head. So we were catering, this is before I really got saved. So we were catering Bob Dylan's show at the Universal Amphitheater, and I had a patch over my eye. And Bob invited me back into his dressing room, his trailer, to have his psychic pray for me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and she prayed for me, you know, picture red and orange and all these colors. And I'm like closed eyes and thinking, all right, this is silly. As soon as she finished, Mary Alice, who was probably a backslidden Black Baptist, backslidden at that time, who knew the power of prayer, she grabbed me and she prayed for me in the name of Jesus, this powerful prayer. And I remember walking out of the trailer going, what was that? And David Mansfield had invited me to go to Europe on the Dylan tour. And I said, I'm not going to go if I still have this. But the next day I started getting better. And so then I did go on the Dylan tour. But yeah, that was interesting. And I have to tell you something about bulimia. So I would make myself, you know, throw up. And one time, and I had met Marty at that time. And I heard these voices saying to me, if Marty knew this about you, he'd want to have nothing to do with you. And I would be, you know, over the toilet. And bulimia was just beginning to be known about. It was like 1981. And my mom, who knew I had it, sent me an article on bulimia. And Marty had an ex-girlfriend who had befriended me. I thought we were friends, but she was just trying to find out stuff about me. And I told her I was bulimic. And so she said to Marty one day, Jennifer's not the person you think she is. So Marty said to me, I get the feeling there are things about you I don't know. And he didn't know what they were. So I gave him that article that my mom had given me on bulimia. And the next day he came back and he said to me, well, that's not so bad. But do you want to know something? I never threw up again.
You never told me.
Wow.
So
incredible.
Oh, it's amazing.
I'm learning this for the first
time.
Because
the devil overplayed his hand. He told me that Marty would reject me if he knew this about me. And Marty did not reject me. And and the devil just went, and I never threw up again. I think I gained about 16 pounds, but he never noticed. But anyway,
I love you,
but that is how I was healed of bulimia. Isn't that amazing?
That's incredible. Yeah, how the Lord addressed mine was through some dreams, but he came into the bathroom where I spent 15 years, slumped over a toilet seat, and Karen Carpenter, superstar, was playing. You know, Karen Carpenter died of an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And that was my first album I owned as a kid, Tommy James and the Shondells, who's saved, by the way. And it's interesting how the Lord just wakes his people up in such beautiful ways. That's amazing. Yeah. It took a few years for me, though.
Okay, good. Well, God is the one who delivers, right?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, well, honey, it's your turn.
That's awesome.
She might have some questions for you regarding.
I'm so shocked that you know Danny Bennett.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I was working at the French Roast Cafe with the old Grapevine there in the Village, and my producer lived around the corner. My ballet school was right around the corner as well, and so I'd go to Danny's house early in the morning and work till 9, and then till 5, and then 5 till 2 in the morning. I'd go to my producers and we'd do music.
That's so funny. Wow, what a small world it is.
Right. That's and then you guys end up going to my church. So that you guys know that's so interesting. Wow, well, very cool.
The reason we know Mike Finizio is because how did we ever, when we first started out, I'm going to go in the middle of our story and then When we first started out, Jenny and I, I'm going to finish up her story. So David was her first love, and he's a pretty brilliant guy, and it's taken me a while to become her second love, like with a bullet. But but they had to break up because their relationship was not going anywhere.
Okay.
I'm saying something. So Jenny and I met a little bit later than that at a wedding, and I saw her, and I just was smitten. And I was probably 28 years old, and
don't blame you.
Sing in here, Marty.
Well, you can go turn it up if you want a little bit. So we were at this wedding, and I saw her talking to somebody, and I just thought she's so cool. And I was single, and the girlfriend she mentioned that I had was a bad relationship that had started in New York City, as a matter of fact. And I saw Jenny, and I accidentally bumped into her, and I said, "Hello." I don't know what I said. I said, "I've seen you somewhere before."
No, you said, "Have we met?"
We met.
Have I ever seen you somewhere before?
Which is so cool. What a cool line to say to somebody. But she said no, with an attitude of
I did not have an attitude.
Really?
I just said, no, I don't think so.
No,
and then you started mentioning Bible studies that maybe we had bumped into.
Really? I didn't remember.
Like Jerry Hauser.
But I had seen her before, the night before. I had seen her before at a Jews for Jesus meeting at the Vineyard in Los Angeles. I had seen her from afar. And now I was up close, and I grabbed her hands, and I said, "Can I call you?" And she said,
I said, "I'm in the phone book under Yaffee, Yaffee." And he looked at me strange, and I said, "I'm Jewish."
Yeah, and she thought I was looking at her strange because she said she was Jewish, and I was just trying to memorize the name. Yaff. Well, and I did eventually call her, and I called her on a biblical holiday called Shavuot.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Shavuot is the Hebrew word meaning weeks,
mm-hmm.
which the church knows as Feast of Tabernacles. And I was at a temple in Los Angeles, and I called Jennifer. I looked up her number, and I called her, and I said, "This is Marty Goetz, and I'm at temple, and for Shavuot."
Well, you left this message on my answering machine.
Right. It was on the answering machine. And what did I say?
You said, "Hi, it's Marty, and I'm at temple. It's Shavuot." I'm thinking, what is Shavuot? I was not raised.
That's so funny.
Her parents were kind of bohemians, they were like artists. You know about artists.
Yeah.
And my parents had raised me in a pretty strict conservative Jewish home. So I knew what Shavuot was. But I was going to say something else about that doesn't matter. I can't remember now. So that home, I'm going to jump back now.
Sure.
That home was in Cleveland, Ohio. And my parents were not nearly as interesting as her parents. But as she said, she had Russian Jewish grandparents. I had Polish Jewish grandparents on my mother's side. So my mother was a first generation American. My father was a second generation American. His grandparents had come from from Russia. So that was my background. So I was raised in a little town called Beechwood, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland. And I had a I'm a non-eventful kid, just kind of growing up in the suburbs. But my suburb happened to be like 90% Jewish. I didn't know Gentiles, not Jewish people, hardly at all. The only Gentiles I knew were people who worked in my father's furniture store. And we had, at this point in time in our society, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but we had cleaning women who came to our house. One was named Myrtle and one was named Lily. And they were Black people who came from African-American people who lived in inner city Cleveland. And they came, and so that I knew them. And then when I was and there were a few non-Jewish people in our school. So the reason I'm bringing it up is my entire world was Jewish. To me, my world was Jewish, and out there was another world altogether. And so that's the environment in which I grew up. And I was just a regular kid watching Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons, and just watching TV. TV was brand new. My father owned a furniture store, so we had one of the first color TVs. So if I couldn't. Bulimia would never be my problem because I would rather die than throw up. I'm not to minimize it, but I mean, I just would rather die. I can't do that. But if I had an addiction, it was to television. I mean, when television came into the world, that was it. I mean, my parents had this beautiful
console,
bought a beautiful basement filled with classic novels and beautiful records. And instead I'm watching My Mother the Car and, Gilligan's Island. So my brain is not what it should be. But all that to say is it was pretty uneventful. I was bar mitzvahed. So at 13, every Jewish boy is bar mitzvahed.
But honey,
what?
You also went beyond your bar mitzvah. You went to Hebrew high school. Most kids don't do that.
Right. And then I went on to Hebrew high school, but I was in a regular public school, but I studied. By the time I was a teenager, I knew how to read Hebrew. Now, I can't really speak Hebrew in the way that an Israeli could speak Hebrew, but I can talk Hebrew with anybody when I'm in a synagogue. If I'm in a synagogue, I'm right there, and that's the way most Jewish kids are. They know how to read Hebrew.
And you're part of the Cantors Club.
I was in the Thank you.
Give them some of your background.
You mean not just confess my addiction to television?
Yeah.
But I was in something called the Cantors Club, which is all these young guys that were in our temple. We would sing with the cantor. Now, some of your listeners might know what a cantor is, but of course. But cantor is the one who he's the worship leader of the synagogue. So he sings Hebrew prayers, and I learned to sing Hebrew prayers. I learned to read the Torah. I don't know if it's not, it's amazing how many Christians have never been to a Jewish synagogue. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. But if they go, they would see every single week they open the Torah, which is a scroll, and it's a parchment. And it's written by scribes. To this day, it's written by scribes who, if they make one mistake, they have to burn the entire thing. That's how amazing it is. And I went to a place called Temple on the Heights, or Heights Temple. And so I would read the Torah. At my bar mitzvah, I read the Torah. And I had a really nice voice when I was young, like a really nice voice before it changed. It was kind of, I could actually.
Vienna Boys Choir kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
That's what I've called the Cantors Club, the Vienna Boys Choir of Heights Temple. And my Torah portion was on Leviticus. And I'm singing it in Hebrew. It sounds really pretty, but what I was actually singing was things like, if you have a scab and it turns yellow and you have it was really not a pleasant thing, but in Hebrew, it sounds really good.
But you're like very Jewish.
Yeah. In other words, thank you.
Well,
I need you to.
Well, I think you should realize, because I'm from a Jewish home, and my brother went to Hebrew school, and he was bar mitzvahed. But as soon as he was bar mitzvahed, that was it.
Yeah, you're more of a secular Jew, and you're practicing Jew.
Yeah.
So you went to Hebrew school, and then when you
conservative. Go ahead.
And after Hebrew school, every day after school, you continued going.
Yeah, I would go to Hebrew school after school.
Every day, 5 days a week?
No, 3 days.
Oh, okay. Until you were how old?
Until I was about 15 or 16.
Okay.
And at the same, so that was my background. Not that interesting, but in terms of American suburban life, it was a little microcosm, a little Jewish. It was a little old world within a new world.
Yeah.
So here I was learning Torah and Hebrew and the ancient prayers of my people. At the same time, I'm going upstairs and watching My Mother the Car, which was a show on television. So I was like with so many baby boomers, I was in that that kind of that duality of the old world.
By the way,
and yeah.
Look at the
time. I know. Old world and a new world. But I was making a point, and now you've made me forget my point. Oh, I know my point. At the same time, were things that are happening in our country, like the Beatles. And, you've heard of the Beatles.
Oh, I grew up with them. Yep.
And I could play piano. I took piano lessons, and my teacher was a man named Mr. Balo, and he taught me how to play by ear. Now, at first I played classical, and I was a lazy kid because I was just too busy watching TV. So I did practice, but I did learn to play by ear. And once I learned to play, I'm sitting at my piano now, but once you learn to play, that's it.
Wow.
Right? And
yeah.
He do that. Once he learned to teach me how to play by ear, then my friends who everybody wanted to be like the Beatles. When I was about 15 or more like 16, my parents, God bless them, bought me an electric organ called a farfisa. And I learned to play the organ, and I could play, and I got in little rock bands, and we played in we practiced in people's basements or in the garage. And so I was in a number of different rock bands, not any as good as the ones that Jenny's brother was in. But I had these little rock bands that I was in. And that's probably why I'm probably yelling. It's probably because my hearing got lost in those basements, But that's what I did through high school, playing in these little bands, and still, just being a suburban kid. And one year, my band got to meet, I think my band was called The Blues Bottle. That was the named after a song by John Sebastian from the Love Blues in the Bottle. And we were practicing, and this kid named Kevin came in, and he was the first Gentile with whom I became friends. And we became fast friends. And it was interesting. I'd go from Beechwood, my little Jewish ghetto, and I'd go over to University Heights and hang out with Kevin. And his parents were Catholic. And they had crucifixes on the wall, and they, little Jesus hanging on them and things like that, So it was like a different world to me, to know a Gentile kid. So I think, in retrospect, I know our time is limited, but in retrospect, I think that was a foreshadowing of what would be in my life, because it was like a little step out into a different world. But anyway, I finished high school and went to Carnegie Mellon University, which, interestingly enough, is where her dad went. It was called Carnegie Tech at the time. So isn't it funny? Isn't it amazing how God works? But I wasn't in any department. I was an English major because I couldn't make up my mind. I could play piano. I'm a pretty good little artist. I can draw things, but I don't ever finish anything. I just doodle. I'm a doodler. And I was voted most talented in my senior class.
Wow.
Yeah, I was. Did you know that? No, you didn't know that. But I was a dilettante, I just did everything, but in college, my freshman year, I was a very shy kid wearing glasses and had pimples. And I was kind of a nerdy guy. I wasn't a super nerd, but I wasn't cool either. I was just kind of right in the middle. And I went to college, and my freshman year, that you would appreciate this, they had, something at Yale called hasty pudding. Is it Harvard or Yale? Hasty pudding. I think might be Harvard. I'm not sure.
I'll ask my producer. He went to Harvard. Yeah.
One of the Ivy League schools has something called Hasty Pudding, which is a drama group that's non-theater people. So that's regular, schmoes like me could be in it, So I got in that show. I auditioned for it. I got in the show, and I was in the chorus, and it was about a rock musical. It was very 70s. This was like 1971. And I fell in love with theater things.
Oh, nice.
And the guy who wrote the show said, you all ought to go audition for this guy in Pittsburgh. Carnegie Mellon's in Pittsburgh. He says he writes shows, and he's looking for people to be in his show. So I auditioned for him, and I got the job. So my freshman year, summer, I went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They were opening up a place called the Jackson Hole Opera House. And I was the onstage piano player for this troupe of people. Now, the guy who wrote the shows was on a very famous show on television. You might have heard it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was the chef on Mr. Rogers' show.
No way. That's fun.
Yes, his name was Chef.
I love Mr. Rogers.
Oh, good. His name was Chef Brockett, and I got the job, and I just got the showbiz bug. So the rest of my 4 years of college, I hardly remember because I was in showbiz. Mm-hmm. And Don kept writing these shows. One of his shows, my sophomore year, went to Off-Broadway, and it was called Sweet Feet. And the reason you've never heard of it is because after 3 performances, we were gone. No. But here we were, college kids. I was a college kid. Well, all the way to New York to be in an Off-Broadway show. It's pretty exciting.
That's really cool.
You know? And after the show closed, there was a fellow in the show named Bert Lloyd. And he was this really handsome, muscular Welsh singer. You know, the Welsh, they can really sing. And he had this beautiful voice. And Don Brockett, Chef Brockett from Mr. Rogers, said, you guys ought to start a little act. So he put together an act called Bert and Marty, very clever. And we started this act, and we started to play around Pittsburgh. So here I was going to school at school during the day. I don't remember what I studied even. But then at night, I was with Bert, and we were playing in these little clubs, and we played in kind of cabarets and things like that all through my college career. So much so that when I graduated, I didn't know what my major was. I had to spend the entire day walking around campus looking for my degree because I was such a dilettante. But Bert and Marty went on to New York City, and we lived on right in what's now, what I can't remember, between 9th and 10th, where the
Hell's Kitchen.
Well, no, not in Hell's Kitchen. It was called the Henry Hudson Hotel. It's like, it's now where, like, I think there's a KQED is there now. I think it's there in that building. So we lived there in New York, and we auditioned for a lady who took us up to the Catskill Mountains. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of what went on in the Catskill Mountains.
Are you talking about where, like, near the Borscht Belt?
That's right. Very good, Miss Vanessa. And you win. Tell her what you won, Jane.
I win your friendships. That's what I win.
So I went to the Borscht Belt, and Bert and I, first year there, won the Best New Act of 1974 in the Borscht Belt. And we thought we were on our way. And we were doing shows in New York City at something called the Commodore Hotel, which is not there anymore. But that's what we had, a variety show act. We did shows, we did songs like from Fiddler on the Roof. We danced with bottles on our head. You know what I mean? It was a variety show thing. Like, you don't see it much anymore. But at that time, still in the 70s, there was that kind of a thing. And there was one obstacle that happened. Bert, who was a good Methodist from Altoona, Pennsylvania, decided he wanted something a little more in his faith. So he went to this place called the Rock Church, which was on 68th Street, I think, on the east side. And it was a holy rolling Pentecostal born again church. And when Bert came back from that church, there was no Bert anymore. Someone had stolen him, and he had become this strange person that I didn't recognize. Just as an aside, he was brought there by a girl named Ann Alt, who looks, in terms of her hair, she looks a little bit like you. She had red hair. She was an actress, and Bert and she met at this church. But forgive me, they didn't meet at the church. Annie was also in the Borscht Belt with her singing partner. So we knew her from the Borscht Belt.
Wow.
So then he goes to this church, and there's Annie at this church, and they are just on fire for Jesus. They're giving out tracts on the street, and he's wanting to preach. But after that, I'm Jewish. That's why I brought up all that Jewish stuff. I'm from Beechwood, Ohio. You know, I read the Torah. I went to Hebrew. I didn't want anything to do with Jesus, because in our mind, you have to remember, I go way back to, I was born in 1952, which is only like 7 years after the end of World War II, in which happened, of course, the Holocaust. So my parents weren't in the Holocaust. I had I had my grandmother's family probably perished in the Holocaust because she left her mother behind and some sisters, and then she never saw them again.
Yeah. My grandfather escaped from Czech Republic during the war during that time.
Your grandfather?
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, people don't understand that now, especially in America, you know. And so our mentality was to not trust the Gentile world. It's not, we didn't hate the Gentile world, but we didn't trust it. So now I'm with Bert Lloyd, and he wants me to be a believer in Jesus because he loved me and wanted me to come along with him. And he was telling me about Jesus. All the writers of the Bible were Jewish. The Gospels are Jewish. Jesus is Jewish, but I didn't want to hear it. So I broke up with Bert and Marty, and we broke up. And I went my way, and he went his way. And I hid out in piano bars and things like that. You know, my first job was like at 88th and 1st in this little piano bar. And then I went uptown to a place called Beefsteak Charlie's, which was on 68th and Broadway. Rock Church, by the way, was 65th.
You don't have to give addresses.
68th and Broadway. And it was called Beefsteak Charlie's. And it was a piano bar. And I started playing there. And lo and behold, I started writing songs with my cousin who also lived there. Now, my cousin ended up being a person who wrote all the music for a show you might have remembered from your childhood. Butterfly in the sky, I can fly places high. Take a look, it's in a book, A Reading Rainbow. Remember that show?
I do, but actually I grew up watching 60s and 70s stuff, so more than that.
There was a show called Reading Rainbow.
I do remember Reading Rainbow.
That was my cousin.
Get to the point of what you do today.
Okay, honey. And so...
Who are you?
I'm just talking to Vanessa, our new friend. So anyway, all that to say is I didn't want anything to do with Jesus. I'm in piano bars. All I want is what the world had to offer. I wanted, wine, women, and song, and that's all I wanted.
Maybe you should sing a Jew Born
honey, will you let me finish?
Should he sing a song?
No, just wait a second.
I love it.
Anyway, so I'm not safe in the piano bars because Bert and his friends would often come in, and they would sit there and listen to me, and they would still want to tell me about Jesus. And I said, I don't want to know about this stuff. I was really angry. I was really, really angry. You know, it says in the Bible that that people would provoke us to anger. You know,
right? Jealousy.
Provoking into anger.
But I also was jealous because they knew something I didn't know.
Yeah,
like that. But at a certain point, I was trying to get my music going because I was writing songs with my cousin, my Reading Rainbow cousin, and nothing was happening. So one day I just decided I'm moving to California because that's where it was all happening in Los Angeles. I moved out there, but before I went there, I stopped in Cleveland, and my parents, for some reason, had this big old family Bible in their bookshelf. And I didn't know how they got it. There's probably some sweepstakes with Ed McMahon or something like that. And I took the Bible with me and put it in a backpack and went to California, and I pitch my songs during the day, and at night I'd read this Bible, not because I wanted to believe, but I wanted to unbelieve. I wanted to find a loophole in there which I could get Jesus out of my life entirely. The problem is I started to like what I was reading.
Wow.
Because I read in Matthew, this is how I thought Matthew would read. This is the story of Jesus Christ, and because of him, we all hate the Jews. And, that's what I thought of, something like that. But instead, I read, this is the story of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And as soon as I read that, I was hooked. So I would read the Bible every day, this big old family Bible. And at the end of it, I thought, you know what? Maybe Jesus is okay to think about, maybe he's something you could put in your life just kind of a little bit. But Annie, my friend from New York, had moved to California, and I didn't know anybody there. So I was hanging out with my friend Annie, the actress who looks a little like you. And she said, you know what, I'm going to take, and I was starting to get soft in my heart towards Jesus because I kind of liked him. And I'm reading the Gospels, and they're all Jewish. Everything in the scriptures has a Jewish root to it.
Yeah.
So I went with her to the beach and there was a guy preaching there named Hal Lindsey.
I know of Hal Lindsey. Yeah.
Called The Late Great Planet Earth. And all these people were on the beach going, hallelujah, hallelujah. And they didn't look wacko like some of the people I'd seen in New York, to tell you the truth. They were like these normal people, like really cool people.
Mm-hmm.
Took me to this place called The Vineyard. There was this man named Ken Gullickson up there on the platform with blonde hair and blue eyes, not Jewish. And then there was a guy up there named Wendell Burton, who had been in a movie with Liza Minnelli called The Sterile Cuckoo. Wendell sang a song about Jesus being a stranger to him. And boy, Jesus was a stranger to me. But somehow after this service, Ken Gullickson gave an invitation, and I just went, I gotta go. I gotta go for it. I don't know why, but I gotta go for it. So Annie took me by the hand, walked up there. I knelt down. They gave me a hug. They said a prayer. They gave me a little paperback Bible, and they said, "Welcome to the family of God." And I said, "Oy vey, what have I done?" And I was a born again Christian. And I didn't find out late. And so then after that, just a little after that, I met a girl named Debbie Boone. Now, how did I meet her? Do you know who Debbie Boone is? Have you ever heard the name?
I'm not sure.
Did you ever tell me, you light up my...
Oh, yeah. She wasn't in my realm, but...
Yeah, okay, that was brand new at the time, 1977. This was 1978 already. And I met her because her boyfriend, Gabri Ferrer, was a Bible study teacher at the Vineyard. And I got the job playing piano for her because she was going out on the road after this song was such a big hit. And I went on the road with Debbie Boone. I toured with her for many years. I met Jenny along the way in 19...
And he started writing. One day he opened up. I'm going to cut to the chase with him. One day he opened up the Bible.
Okay.
And he looked at Psalm 23. And he put music to Psalm 23, and Debbie Boone recorded it. And so Marty's had a career for the last 40 years of music. We haven't even said what he does. He's been called a psalmist, a modern day psalmist.
Oh, I love it.
We've done about 13 albums.
Everybody doesn't know who I am?
No, 2 videos.
I'm shocked.
And we've only got 2 minutes left. But ever since COVID hit, all of our dates were canceled, and we started broadcasting from our living room twice a week. We've done 70 so far, 70 one-hour concert worship services on Tuesdays and Fridays, 7 o'clock Central Time. And it's called House of Worship. And you can watch it on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. But, that's just that, the Instagram's just not that great. But yeah, and people tune in every week, and our audience is growing, and
awesome.
and it's just a time for people to be refreshed because the world is in such turmoil.
Such a time as this, right?
And Marty and Misha, if you go to YouTube and look up the song For Such a Time as This, Marty Goetz, Marty and my daughter Misha, who's now 30 years old, wrote a song. You would love it. You should listen.
Oh, I want to. That was the very first book that the Lord led me to.
Oh my gosh. Esther. Called For Such a Time as This. Misha sings the voice of Esther, and Marty sings the voice of Mordecai.
Oh, it's my favorite story. I love it. Oh my God.
For Such a Time as This, Marty Goetz and Misha. And the thing about Marty's music is it's very theatrical. People are always writing to him saying, I have an idea for a play. I have an idea for a movie. Could you write? And no, that's not what he does. He really writes by inspiration, by the Holy Spirit. And I'm sorry that he didn't get a chance to sing any songs for you, but maybe we'll do this.
Done?
Maybe we'll do this again. We've got
absolutely. We have a couple minutes. It's okay if we go a couple minutes over.
I'll sing a little benediction that my daughter Misha wrote. And by the way, I won't tell you what I was thinking. I'll just sing.
Just sing. I'm his manager, by the way.
I love it.
All these years.
Wow.
May the Lord bless and keep you. May his grace and his face shine upon you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. and give you peace. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. V'yasem lecha shalom. This is the way you shall be blessed from day to day. He'll be your rest. Sing with me. May the Lord bless and keep you. May his grace and his face shine upon you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.
And give you peace.
And give you, all together now.
And give
you peace.
Oh, thank you. What a wonderful ending to our show. I could just talk to you guys for hours and hours. So if you guys don't mind sticking by after just a couple minutes, just so I can be great. Yeah. So that unfortunately, that's all the time we have, audience. That was just a fun time with you guys. I loved it. Could go on for hours, but we'll have you on another time. Sometimes we'll just maybe can join us with our we have a panel every Sunday called Uptime Community. And that's the name of our channel, Uptime Community Church. And we have a panel discussion every Sunday. So if you ever want to join us, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you. And yeah, we'll just do church and fellowship and all that good stuff. So
well, God bless you, Vanessa.
Thank you.
God bless you. And I'll see you backstage. Just stick around. Alrighty. Well, that was all the time we have, folks. Thank you so much for joining us again with another episode of A New Creation, True Life Testimonies. That was Marty and Jenny Goetz. God bless you and may his face shine upon you. Shalom.
May the Lord bless and keep you. May his grace and his face shine upon you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, and give you peace. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. V'yasem lecha shalom. This is the way you shall be blessed from day to day. He'll be your rest. May the Lord bless and keep you. May his grace and his face shine upon you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace and